Welcome to this module, which I personally believe is perhaps one of the most important modules in this credit information course. It's all about credit reports. This module will cover not only what kinds of reports we have, but it will also look at what these reports contain, what as an individual who is a borrower or a potential borrower should be looking for in a credit report, what you as a lender should be looking for in a credit report, and how importantly you integrate that credit report that you get along with the credit score into your credit decisioning process to make it more objective, to make it more efficient, and to of course improve the processing time and make a more informed decision. Now, before we actually look at the report, let's understand the cycle under which this report is generated. The first of three steps in that is to collect the data. This data is collected from banks, from NBFCs, and as you can see in the diagram, that becomes the most crucial component because that's from where it all starts, collecting data. Once the data collection has been done and it is in the system of the credit bureau, then you have to validate this data. You got to categorize this data, you need to analyze this data and not only make sure that the quality is complete and correct, but more importantly, it's in a position to be able to move to the third stage, which is the process of giving out credit reports to people who want to use it, the lenders. Now, that process of validation, the second stage I talked about, has one important component, which is what we call the deduplication. There are people with names which are similar. There are people who have common addresses, they have common dates of birth. It's important that you have a system in place where not only will you get all data about a particular individual, you get only data about that individual and not data about someone whose name is similar, who happens to live at the same location and address or has the same date of birth. That process of deduplication, as it is called in the industry, requires a customization depending on the country. So for example, in the United States, it could be a social security number. In India, we have multiple because none of them is perfect. You have a PAN card, you have a Aadhaar card, you have a passport number, you have a driver's license, and each bureau in India has actually created a deduplication algorithm which allows them to pull out all data pertaining to me, only me, and all about me. Now, the third stage is the dissemination process, where you give out reports. These reports are typically given out to member lenders, lenders who are already members and who are supplying data, and therefore by the principle of reciprocity, they are allowed to pull and access reports. However, as an individual, you can pull your own report, and one report a year per bureau is free for yourself. You can't pull your friend's report or your wife's report or your spouse's report or your sibling's report, but you can pull your own report. And it is important you do that because you don't want surprises when you go for a loan that there is something which is either missing, incomplete or incorrect in your report. So I would suggest that you pull your report once a year and make sure that what is there is about you, only about you, and all about you. So let's start by taking a look at what is a credit report. A credit report is a factual, objective image, a behavior of your past payment history. It represents whether you paid loans on time, have you taken loans, what loans you've taken, from whom have you borrowed, and of course, are you outstanding, are you delayed, are you delinquent, and all those details. We will of course look at each of these components as we look at the detailed contents of a report. Now broadly, there are two kinds of reports. The individual report, which has the credit history of people like you and me as individuals, or the non-individual or commercial report, which has the credit history of non-individuals, companies, private limited companies, public limited companies, partnership firms, trusts, etc. There is another category which is what is called the microfinance report. Now, the microfinance report is no different from an individual report. It contains similar data. It is just that by the very nature of the industry, the microfinance report goes through a different set of algorithms to come up with the data you want, because the quality, depth and range of data in microfinance lending might be and is a little different from normal banking and mortgage loan lending. So let's take a look at what are the broad contents or categories in an individual consumer report. The three categories are: 1, demographic details about the person or persons, right? For example, you will have your personal name, your address, your PAN card and other identifiers and some other information, your address for example, and we will talk about each of these sections in the next piece that follows after this. You then have what is the non-individual report, the commercial report, the report pertaining to companies, partnership firms, etc. Again, there you will not see anything different. The demographic details will continue, right? What will not be there is date of birth, but there will be registration number, directors' details, owners, stakeholders, etc., which make up the constitution of a company. The second component is the account details. Like I said, in the account details, what you will see is everything about your borrowing. How much have you borrowed? Are you paying your loans on time? If you have been late, by how many days have you been late? Have you defaulted to a point where the lending institution had to write off or settle the account? In the current scenario, has there been a moratorium that you exercised and took, and therefore there was a restructuring or a reconstruction of the loan that happened? All these details come in the section on account details, and is therefore probably the most important section for you. Similarly, again, if you are dealing with a non-individual report, a commercial report, the similar details will come. You might not have it in the same format. You will have more details. For example, whether it's a working capital loan or whether it's a plant and machinery loan or is it an overdraft, all those details will also reflect in the commercial reports account section. The third section of our reports, or the third component or the third segment of our reports, is the inquiries section. The inquiries section has all details on inquiries made on you, either as an individual or as a company or as a non-individual, by lenders when you have applied for a loan. So for example, if I was to apply today for a bank for say a car loan, the bank will pull a report on me from one of the 4 bureaus. When they do that, that shows up as an inquiry. What it tells the customer, what it tells the lender is something we will talk about when we actually study the inquiry section of the report shortly. So again, to summarize, before we start looking at a report within individual or commercial, there are 3 segments: demographic details, account details and inquiry details, and all of them play a big role in the decisioning process and in the development of the score, which is a separate module itself, because it has an importance which comes into play in your credit decisioning. The next section of this module is going to actually look at a sample report, both from a consumer loan perspective and from a non-individual or a non-consumer loan perspective. What we will do is 2 things. We will look at each segment of the report and understand its contents. More importantly, we will also discuss how you as a lender can actually interpret that content and build it into your underwriting policies. Because don't forget, a report is only a supporting tool that enables you to take an underwriting or credit decision. It helps you draft your credit policy, and it helps your underwriters to apply that policy in a day-to-day loan that they look at, and for the front office people to remember that the underwriting policy is in sync with the credit policy and therefore with the credit report, and how all 3 of them mesh together to make your life easier. As an individual borrower, I think it's important that you understand this report, because ultimately it's all about you. So tomorrow, for example, if you were to apply for a loan, you need to pull your own report, and 1 report per year is free, as you know, where you actually start looking at your report, whether it contains all details about you, only about you, and nobody else's should be in there. Now that is very important, because that affects the score, that affects the credit decisioning process. So you want to be sure that your report is a fair, accurate, complete and comprehensive representation of your credit behavior and your credit history over the last few years when you've taken a loan, repaid a loan, or whatever you've done in terms of acquiring credit. And that includes a credit card, for example, before we feel that that is not a part of this entire process.